Hello, knife community. Alex here, bringing you another video. I saw another YouTuber who's in the custom knife scene do a format where he kind of talks about the community and just thoughts before presenting the knife. He goes in front of the camera to do that, and I haven't been doing that in my videos, so you're gonna look at a knife while I commentary, and then maybe in the future we can change that up. But I kind of have two topics I wanted to discuss. The first one is knife trading, and the reason I want to discuss that is because I acquired this in a knife trade. So I haven't done any knife trades prior to this. I pretty much buy and sell for cash. I am moving. I'm moving to a state with a blade length restriction, and so I am migrating some of my collection to other homes that can enjoy them, where I won't be able to do that. And I've been, I guess I opened my mind to trading when the possibility of owning something that I could take with me to my new location, and I'd be able to carry it. So that's kind of why knife trading. And there's kind of two parts to knife trading, or I guess there's two classes of knife trading. There's like production and mid-tech knives and custom knives. I really didn't realize how big custom knives were in the trading side until recently, where I was kind of introduced to that based on this. I guess there's a lot more trading than I had realized there was. And to be honest, I think most of the custom knife trading is pretty clean because there's not fakes per se. Like, there's not a fake Jeremy Marsh Vanquish, or not that I'm aware of. So it's pretty easy to like determine who would be a scammer, especially if there's a lot of times there's only one in the world. For these custom knives, it's pretty easy to determine if somebody posts it claiming to have it and you know like where that one-off custom knife is or who it belongs to, especially if it's been in their collection for a long time. So it's pretty easy to weed out scammers, which is why you really don't see it very often. That being said, the production and mid-tech side is not that way. If you're trading in like a microtech forum, for instance, microtech is a big company. It's at the right price range where people are really looking to get into it, but they'd like to get into it at a budget, potentially looking at something used. And there are a lot of fakes on microtechs, unfortunately, a lot of counterfeit goods. And the consequences to that is that because there's so many of them, the community is so big, it's very difficult to determine what might be real and what might not be real, especially if you don't have a great eye for it. And on top of that, there's so many people and there's a lot of copies of the same colors and configurations that it's impossible to know if the person who claims to have it does or doesn't really have one, because you can't narrow it down like customs. Now you can still do your due diligence and ask for references and photos with today's date on a sticky note next to the knife, just to make sure that like they have what they claim they do. And there's ways around that, but my point is that the custom knives are much easier to keep honest in that way. And I also, I guess, just wanted to kind of share my experience with that, and that that worked out well for me, and I'm pretty enthusiastic about my trade, so that I could get into a knife that I can have and get out of a knife that I can't have. Not that I didn't like those other knives that I've been moving around, but that's kind of what's best for me in my collection right now. So if I ever move back to an area where I can have longer blades, I will probably pull in a couple of bigger knives again, just because I really enjoyed having those. The other kind of bullet point I have is that I wanted to talk about was the current status of the custom knife community. I think the custom knife community was at the height of its excitement probably in like the 2017 to 2020 frame. And then after COVID, it seems like it really dove off, other than a few makers. I'm not going to talk about every maker that didn't really happen with, but I think what we see is that a lot of people have knives that they paid big money for, and those knives are not demanding that money anymore. So for instance, if somebody bought a table price $2,000 knife, and then somebody else bought it for $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 because that's what the secondary market was demanding. When they tried to turn it around in 2022 for $7,000, nobody was biting at that. And so we've kind of come into an interesting scenario where either people are taking huge losses on knives to get out of them, or people are keeping knives that they way overpaid for. And that's kind of um, I guess a good thing if you want to keep your knives in your collection, or bad thing if you want to move your knives but you don't feel like you can get rid of them because you'll just take too much of a hit on them and it's just not worth it to you. I guess the moral of that story is that when you're buying custom knives, especially on the secondary market or in general, like when you're spending your money on things, you should really make sure that it's worth it to you to own it at the price you're paying. Because my general philosophy is that knives aren't investments, they're not assets, they don't grow in value. Most of the time that's true. Sometimes you get lucky and they do, like Rexfords or Stan Wilson non-flipper flippers. That market has been strong before COVID, and it's been strong after COVID, and I anticipate it to continue being strong for a while. But most of the time you don't get that. Most of the time makers get really hot and everybody wants their stuff, and it's great, and then the market changes its opinion and there's a new maker, and I feel like that's how it goes more often than not, where makers come and go. And it's not that they like stop making incredible knives, it's just that people in the custom knife community are so infatuated with the latest and greatest, and it only takes a couple of really cool knives with maybe some interesting materials to really change like where the market wants to go. So I guess, think about what you're paying for your knives and make sure that it's worth it to you, because if you way overpay for a knife and, you end up changing knives a lot, it's like, you may not get what you put into it, and that could be disheartening. So yeah, those are kind of my two points on knives before we start here. So without any further ado, let's talk about what's in front of you. This is a Jeremy Marsh Vanquish. I believe it is a V2 and the size is mini. Jeremy Marsh has 4 sizes of Vanquish knives. The full size, I don't know what the blade length is, but it's half an inch-ish more blade. He's got the mini, which I think is 3.3 inches. He's got the California mini, which I believe is 3 inches or less. And then he's got the micro, which I don't know what the blade length on that is, but maybe another half an inch-ish of less blade. So as far as I know, there's 4 sizes. I do believe he makes this model in both flipper and thumb stud, and Jeremy Marsh has cool thumb studs. They're very like geometric and angular, which is a pretty interesting look. I myself am not a thumb stud guy, I'm a flipper guy, so when I look for knives, I'm generally looking for flippers. I do have a couple of thumb hole knives, but for the most part, that's not really what my collection direction has been going. So like I said in my intro and just commentary, I had traded out of one of my big overbuilt knives that had a blade length that was too long, and I got into this because Jeremy Marsh's work had kind of been growing on me. For the most part, Jeremy Marsh has some really bold styling, and that's exactly how I would describe this. It has a lot of interesting touches to it, and a lot of interesting angles, and an interesting blade shape with some very different grinds. And when I first got into knife collecting, especially around his V1 Vanquishes, I wasn't super into that design just because it wasn't for me, not because it wasn't well executed or it just wasn't, it was just too much for me. That being said, the V2 Vanquish has kind of a different flipper tab, and that's pretty much, as far as I know, the only difference. I think he's changed the pocket clip a couple of times. We'll talk about the pocket clip later. But it turned a like very shark fin flipper into more of this flat top flipper. I'm going to guess that the action on the V1 was maybe more light switchy, and the V2 is certainly more push buttony. To be honest with you, I like light switch knives or light switch flipper tabs maybe a little bit more. To me, they just feel like they're more custom because, and I say that as if this is not a custom with a push button style flipper, but I say that because for the most part, those light switch knives have to have like a perfectly dialed in detent in order to feel like they have good action. Whereas push button knives, you could basically have no detent, and as long as you just leverage it and you really press down, as soon as you change change direction, it'll fly open with the leverage that you've applied. So it's like, I feel like you can have a little more room on flexibility for the detent, whereas on light switch knives, if your detent sucks, your action sucks. So nonetheless, this particular knife I like the looks of, so I had the opportunity to buy one. The look of this had been growing on me just because I've been kind of getting into some funkier grinds, and I thought that this blade shape was particularly interesting and usable. The belly of this knife seems like it would also be easy for me to sharpen on my wicked edge, so that kind of intrigued me. I haven't sharpened it yet, but maybe I'll tell you why I'm considering it here in a little bit. I also wanted to talk about the cases that Jeremy Marsh provides with his knives. I'm not the first owner of this. This is a 2018 from one of the Florida shows, I believe, East Coast Custom Knife Show. And I believe these are handmade maybe by him or one of his family members or friends, but you can see it's got his logo all over it. This particular one is Velcro. I don't know what other designs he has, but nonetheless, it's kind of cool to have this like customization versus just getting a black zipper case. So I kind of like that. It's different, but just wanted to show that to you because it is part of the package. I'm gonna get this out of the way though, and we can talk about the knife. So we'll start off here at the blade. Jeremy does produce his maker's mark. You can see it there. Typically, I don't like maker's marks on the blades. I like having a clean blade. That being said, this maker's mark is pretty, it's not super bold and like way all over the blade. Like it's pretty minimal. It's also kind of an attractive maker's mark, so you know, I guess that's nice. Whereas like some makers, they will like sign their name all the way across the flat or something. This one's not really in the way. The other thing about this blade is that it has an interesting finish on it. My understanding is that the finish is acid washed, and then he used oil and steel wool to create the satins. So it's a satin finish, but it's kind of like a black satin finish, which is pretty unique. Moving on, we'll talk more configuration, then kind of what I think about things. The bolsters are titanium and they are stonewashed. The scales are, I believe they are a brown micarta. Although for brown micarta, the colors coming out of these things, especially when you have good light, is pretty incredible. Continuing to move around, we have a titanium backspacer, very Jeremy Marsh-like. It's kind of got that like V. You have to excuse the dust in there. And then it's also got these like pale blue purple titanium liners. This is a liner lock, as you can see. So the other side, you've got the same bolster and scale material. And then you also have the famous Jeremy clip. When I say famous Jeremy clip, I say most of Jeremy's clips are pretty awesome. They're very unique in that they are very artistic and super usable because they have these like gigantic surfaces for your pocket to interact with, which makes them really usable. This clip actually looks pretty tame compared to some of Jeremy's other clips. I said that he had transitioned which clips he was using on the Vanquishes. His old clips are a lot bigger, or his V1 clips are a lot bigger. But they're just as beautiful and usable, in my opinion. I've never owned one with that, so when I say usable, I am mostly imagining it's usable because of what I know about this clip, but I haven't experienced that clip to really be able to test drive that theory. I have another Jeremy Marsh knife that I'm going to show you now just because it's kind of relevant to the clip conversation. So this is my Jeremy Marsh Rockstar. You've seen, oh, misfire. You have seen this knife before in videos. I've also sent this knife to Dirk to take a look at and get his input on it. As I kind of expected, most people are polarized by the flipper tab on this guy, but we'll go back to the clip. You can see this clip and my Vanquish clip look pretty similar. This one's a little bit longer and maybe the angle there is a little bit higher. Obviously, they're in different materials, but this one I had been really enjoying. This one goes in and out of the pocket super easily, and I dig it. This one for me does not go in and out of the pocket nearly as easily for whatever reason. I guess it's maybe just a little bit tighter. I could probably get that adjusted if it was a big deal. I have been wearing thicker pants with this knife as it's winter here, so maybe when I switch out to something a little bit thinner, it'll be a little bit easier, but I'm sure you could also get it adjusted if you really wanted to. If I didn't mention, this clip matches the bolsters. It is a stonewashed finish, which is great for hiding wear. Speaking of hiding wear, let's go back to the blade for a second. And I apologize, there's a little bit of oil on the blade there, that's why it's shiny towards the bolster on the blade. I didn't clean it off super well before the video, but I wanted to shoot this video before I started really carrying it, because when I got this knife, it was pretty much mint. So speaking of finish, I'm probably in the minority here, but satin finishes are not my favorite. And it's not because it's not well done. It's just satin finishes in general, nothing to do with this particular satin finish. But the reason is because I feel like it always shows scratches fast, because when you have all of these straight lines in what's usually a non-cutting direction, and when I think of cutting direction, like when I'm cutting a box or something, if I'm cutting this way, like away from the camera that way, the material slides over the blade like this, and as it scuffs the blade up, you'll get vertical scuffs against the horizontal lines. And to me, basically what it does is it shows the wear fast, because the scratches are in the exact opposite direction of how the blade was finished. Let me try and pull out one of my satin finish knives to show you what I mean. So this is a Steve Skiff Culprit. It's got a nice satin finish on there, and we will see if I can find any scratches on this blade. I have used it a little bit, but usually when I'm looking for scratches on camera, I struggle to find it. And it looks like I'm gonna struggle on this one today too. You can see the satin finish on this one is very high. Scratches do exist. Unfortunately, I just can't see them very well on the camera. Let's try one more. Maybe a little light will help. There you go. Okay, so you can see it now. I apologize for really messing up the white balance on the camera, but you can see if you look right there in the middle of the blade, there's vertical scratches on the horizontal satins. I'm gonna put this away now. I just couldn't be made a liar twice in a row. That's why I had to do that for you. This is a Walter Randolph Wyvern if you're interested. Has a great satin finish. But nonetheless, why I don't care for satin finishes is because of that. I just feel like you see the wear faster. This is going to be a hot take, but I probably prefer Stonewash finish over everything because I like hiding the wear. It makes me feel like I can carry the knife without too much extra drama. So why does that matter to me? I think that for this knife, I want to try Dirk's 365 knife day challenge, where he carries the same knife for 365 days. Maybe I'll create another video about that, just so I can talk more about that. But I kind of just want to experience this knife, and I think that doing a challenge similar to that will get me there. I think it'll help me experience this knife and kind of fall in love with it more than I already do like it. So let's talk about some of the other just general knife things that I discuss. Let's talk about action for a second, because this is kind of interesting. I'm going to pull the Rockstar away, but we'll get it out for more size comparisons in a little bit here. So the flipper tab is interesting. It is angled in a unusual way. It's kind of angled down, whereas most push button flippers are pretty flat. I guess this one is also slightly down, but when you're looking at these, to me, this one is more aggressive than that one. And what that does is eventually, as you continue pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, your hand starts to slide down the flipper tab, and you compensate by that, like subconsciously, by trying to like flatten yourself out. And when you do that, that's what kicks the knife out. And I don't know if that's because Jeremy intentionally designed the flipper tab that way, as if he tried it a few different ways and this is what he liked the best, or if he just liked the way it looked and it ended up being a good flipper tab choice for this particular knife. And it's interesting because this blade is pretty heavy. It's got pretty thick stock, and the way it's ground has a ton of weight at the top. So although it does have a pretty strong detent, and I will show you that, and you'll maybe try and listen, get it nice and close here. See, it really gets sucked in there, and it's got quite the thunk. Because it's a push button, and the way you compensate naturally for where your hand wants to sit as you're flipping it, it has pretty good action. The detent doesn't feel like it's crazy strong when you're using the knife, but it definitely feels pretty strong when you're closing the knife. Like this blade gets sucked in there from quite a ways away, if I have to say so myself. We'll show you the Walter Randolph. I love the action on this knife. I just want to show you it as a comparison. So I don't know, to me the Marsh like detent feels stronger when I am letting the knife kind of get sucked back into the detent, but it's hard to explain how the action is. It's good action to me. Like it's pretty good action. It's just different. So continuing to talk about the knife, and I apologize, it's starting to get dark outside, so you're starting to see more of the yellow light of the room I'm in rather than the natural light. But it has a couple of finger grooves. The finger grooves are pretty shallow and they're pretty pointed. And when I say pointed, I just mean that like if your fingers really don't fit in them and you really have to grab the knife like that, it's not comfortable to do it that way. For me and the size of this knife, my fingers do fit in here. I kind of have medium, large-ish gloves. You could maybe have hands of a little bit bigger and still be okay. My hands do fall within the grooves, so it doesn't bother me. There are no grooves. There's just really this one groove and then, the first half of the second groove. And then the rest of your hands can really wrap all the way around the knife. So as far as the comfort goes, it's pretty good for me, but I could see that if you have really big hands, I don't think that this size would work for you. You may have to look at one of his bigger sizes. Other than that, I don't have any like hot spots. The clip doesn't bother you as the knife is in your hand. The reverse grip, I never do this with my customs. The tip kind of comes into a point here, and so where my hands sit, it's kind of an uncomfortable spot to rest your thumb. Again, I never use my knives like this, so this doesn't matter to me, but if you use your knives in reverse grip a lot, maybe that's something to note on this particular Vanquish. There might be knives that have better reverse grips. As far as fit and finish goes, the seams are all exactly what you'd expect from Mr. Jeremy Marsh. They are perfect. There is no feeling between them, and that's especially hard to do when you have a pretty easy material to take away and a more difficult material to take away, because as you're smoothing them out, the rate that this one gets depleted is much quicker than this one, so this is impressive for sure. And Jeremy's been making knives for a while, and he's well renowned for his fit and finish, so I certainly expect that level of work from him, and he certainly delivers. As far as lockup goes, we are very solid on the lockup. This knife is probably not even broken in, because like I said, it was made in 2018, February of 2018, but man, it doesn't have a mark on it. And when I got it, I put a drop of lube in it because it felt so dry, and I was like, okay, well, it really feels like we're still breaking this knife in, to be honest. I don't know if that's true or not, because you can't see the detent ball track, so I don't know how much it was flipped before I got it, but it felt really dry. So the other thing, I guess, he does have hardware in here. I think they look like Torx bits. I kind of wish it was all hidden hardware, and he can do hidden hardware because you see the clip doesn't have any showing hardware. But on this design, he just chose to use this normal hardware, and it doesn't detract from the look, in my opinion, but I could see this being a really attractive knife with no additional hardware here. And so yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on this. I'll try and show you the inside here. you can just barely make out the maker's name. There you go, a little bit of light help you out. Jeremy Marsh, and you can see the birth date in there. There you go. I didn't realize how close I was gonna be able to get, but yep, you can see it. So that's kind of the only thing that he's got going on the inside. I don't see that the scales are like lightning cut or anything. And this is kind of a heavy knife, to be honest. Like, it's kind of small, but it's pretty chunky. It's pretty easy to carry. I have carried it, and like I had said, the clip is maybe a little tighter than my other Jeremy Marsh clip, but it's pretty doable. So yeah, that's kind of the Vanquish. I'll put it up next to a couple of other knives for you here, just because these are what I got out. So there's the Walter Randolph Wyvern. You can see the blade's much bigger, handle is much bigger. It's also maybe a little bit taller, although the Vanquish is pretty tall for a small knife, to be honest with you, which is good because in small knives that means that you have a lot to grip while you're using the knife, but you don't have like a lot of length. So that's not a bad thing in my opinion. You can see it next to the Rockstar there. Rockstar is also a little bit bigger. I don't have any of my production knives next to me, so I apologize about that, but that's just how we're gonna roll. And then maybe we will compare it to the GTC. The reason I'm going to compare it to the GTC is because it's kind of the same story. It's a pretty short knife. I think this is a 3.2 inch blade. That is a 3.3 inch blade, so the Marsh might be a touch bigger. But this is another knife that's overall, it's pretty short, but because it's nice and wide, in your hand it feels pretty great. And then we'll also compare it to the skiff here. I don't know what the blade length on the skiff is, but I think it's a little bit longer and maybe a little bit narrower. It's another comfortable knife and a good size for most everyday carries. So that's kind of what I have for you today. And so I apologize about the lighting. Maybe I'll decide to reshoot this. Maybe I won't. But yeah, that's kind of what I got going on. And that's I just wanted to share this with you. So let me know if you like the kind of mild commentary at the beginning of the videos, or if you just want me to talk about the knife. I don't know. I guess I just kind of I started my YouTube channel to share my thoughts about knives, and I think that most of the custom collectors, people who collect custom knives primarily, they're kind of interested in more than just the knife. They kind of want to hear the story, and they want to be involved in the community. And I think that being involved in the community is more than just looking at the knives. It's interacting with the people and you know, becoming friends with the people and knowing the community. So if you like that and you want to continue seeing that, I guess let me know. If you just want me to talk about the knives, you know, that's okay too. Just let me know. And so yeah, thank you for coming, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed this. So I'll give you a couple more action shots here. Maybe we'll do another roll around, and maybe I'll pull out the light so that the lighting is not yellow. Yeah, you can kind of see the brightness of that handle. Like, it's deceptively bright for a brown micarta, but that's what it was listed as, and I don't know, nobody's told me otherwise. So when I first started entertaining the trade, I thought it was red, but I don't know. This is it's a good color. Kind of reminds me of like a nice fall color. Kind of reminds me of that GTC that's kind of Halloween-y to me. I like that. I kind of like the theme ones, so. Not bad for a left-handed flick, being that I am a right-handed user. I guess that tells you enough about the action that you need to know. This is probably not one that you could just hand to anybody and they would get the action because it's push button. I think it requires maybe a touch more dexterity and / knife skill, whereas like Bodega or Shirogorov to me is pretty much you can just hand it to anybody and Joe Schmo can for sure figure it out. This one's not quite that, but it's pretty good. So yeah, and I apologize about the oil on that. It's a consistent finish, but yeah, I don't know. Like for me, I wish the finish was Stonewashed because it won't show wear, and satins just aren't my jam. It's not that it's not pretty and it's not well executed. There's 1,000 reasons to like satin. It's just I would prefer something that hides wear better. Even like a damasteel, like something that's heavily patterned, would show wear less. So I don't know, it's just a choice. Like a lot of people really do like it and they really appreciate it, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. I will catch you later.